Well, Hungary's government banned the Budapest Pride parade, citing child protection laws. I wonder why. Here is a screen from the Los Angeles Pride parade recently. There is nudity. I tried to make sure there's minimal, but I mean, would you bring your children around that? We can take that down now. That's probably good. That's good. You've seen the butts. Whereas pride parades may once have been about equal rights for homosexuals, they have morphed into public celebrations of sex acts. I think we all can agree that if straight people pulled half the stunts we've seen at these events, they'd be shut down for indecency too. Well, European Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen threatened Hungary with sanctions over this ban. She says you need to let the Pride Parade go forward or else sanctions are coming. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban responded, telling her to mind her own business. So what's going on in Hungary? Why are they such a target? Joining us from Europe is independent journalist Naomi Sebit, or Seept. I'm sorry, it doesn't, excuse my pronunciation. Right. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Particularly about this topic. This is very dear to my heart because I care a lot about, well, children, obviously, but especially because Ursula von der Leyen is obviously German. And we have a lot of these particular issues with the government romanticizing, glorifying the LG barbecue community. And completely hiding the fact that they are enabling pedophilia. And this is something that I've been calling out a lot in Germany, and especially some of my friends from the AfD, the opposition party. Vanessa Behrendt is a great example. She just recently hosted a child protection congress in Germany, and it's terrifying to see how it's particularly the left-wing parties that want to normalize stuff. Like we have public sex education pamphlets, guidelines that were introduced by the left and by the Green Party, where they encourage masturbation for toddlers, actual babies between 0 and 3 years old. Yeah.
I mean, in the AfD, I mean, you know, you've been labeled the AfD party in Germany just being labeled extremist. So it's extremist to care about the nuclear family. It's extremist to not want, you know, grown men parading around naked in front of families on the street. Like, that's extremist now, Naomi.
Yeah, ironically. And this is not an exaggeration, by the way. I just went to a pride parade recently, kind of undercover, just to see what's going on. And there were many children running around and half-naked men, actually just wearing like a thong. And they encourage this for children because obviously all these icons, rainbows, and then unicorns, sparkles, of course that's appealing to children. I can only imagine, like, if I had been dragged to a pride parade as a child, I would have loved it because of all the childish motives that they use. They pretend to be childish themselves. And that's what makes it so disgusting. That is actual grooming. This entire ideology is meant to introduce children to it. And that's, by the way, why the left rely on immigration from all these countries where they reproduce like crazy, because their own people do not reproduce, because they discourage it. They are against the heterosexual white family.
Right. I'm struck by what is freedom in Germany, because you don't have the freedom of speech. You don't have the freedom of press. But you have the freedom to have your private bits out in public. I'm so confused by this. And then, you know, when a quote from Ursula von der Leyen is that, you know, marching for your rights is a fundamental freedom. But she did not really champion the rights of people who protested COVID restrictions. So I can't draw a straight line between what is freedom and what is a fundamental right in Germany.
It's complete moralism. It's not real ethics. It's not about defending the rights of LGBT people. It's not for the oppressed. It's just an agenda and an ideology, and they are trying to come up with these moral laws to defend themselves. And the most gullible people, especially young adults, teens, they fall for it. And they think if I'm running around with a pride flag, then I'm doing something great for the world. But they completely disregard the fact that there are many people who are speaking out against it for good reasons, like we elaborated on before. And they are oppressed, like they do not get any rights. In fact, my friend Vanessa Behrendt from the AfD that I just mentioned, she gets prosecuted by the state prosecution for calling out pedophiles who are actually running blogs, like public websites in Germany, where they encourage pedophilia and say that it should be legalized. But then the German media came out and said it should be illegal for Vanessa Behrendt to call out these pedophiles because they are not inherently criminal as long as they don't hurt children. They are just advocating for themselves and for their rights. They want to be part of the LGBT community. And the LGBT community is staying quiet about it, and then they cry because they accuse everyone of being homophobic or transphobic. If I say that I do not want pedophiles in our community, in our society, they align themselves with the pedophiles, and then they pretend that they don't.
If you've been seriously injured, your case could be worth millions, and you should know exactly what your rights are. That's why I want to tell you about Morgan & Morgan. They're America's largest injury law firm with over 1,000 attorneys working in all 50 states. And unlike a lot of firms that settle quickly, Morgan & Morgan doesn't take lowball offers from insurance companies. Just in the past few months, they won $12 million in Florida when the insurance company offered only $350,000. And in New York, they secured $6.8 million on a case where the offer was just $275,000. And the best part? It's absolutely free unless you win. Insurance companies try to pay out as little as possible. Morgan & Morgan fights to get you more if you become their client. It only takes a few minutes to see if you have a case, and you can do it right from your phone. It's that easy. You can visit forthepeople.com/redacted, or you can click the link in the description to get started. So, I mean, Hungary is trying to put up a wall against this, protect its population from this perversion that's taken hold across Europe, this agenda. And an overwhelming number of people in Hungary absolutely do not want to be a part of the EU. They don't want to be a part of these policies. Are we heading for sort of an EU civil war?
Well, we are clearly heading towards an Soviet European Union tyranny in a way, because they want to take over all the sovereign nations in Europe. They did the same with Romania, for example, where they barred the original right-wing opposition candidate from running altogether. And they want to be in full control of the European Union. Why? I think the main reason right now is because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And that's why they went so hard against Romania and now against Hungary. They want to see how far they can go with restrictions of freedoms in these individual sovereign nations so that they have full control over the elections every single time.
I want to ask you a cultural question. The last time we were in Munich, we went into a hot sauna, and nudity is clearly an acceptable part of German culture on the beaches and things like that. And I got lectured about wearing my bathing suit bottoms by a woman who was German, saying that's unsanitary. We come in here naked. That's what we do. And you see nudity in more public places in Europe than we do in the United States. So how... this is a sincere question. How do you draw the line between nudity at a pride parade and nudity? I could never figure that out, how wearing my bathing suit bottoms is unsanitary in a steam room, but that's what this German lady told me. So how do we draw the line between, publicly acceptable nudity and sexualized nudity in these societies?
Honestly, I fully agree with you that this is very problematic. And I know that it has become kind of like a cultural thing in Germany, and it should be that way. It should be harmless to take your children to the sauna and then be naked in there, because that has been normalized in Germany. However, I personally, I've spoken about this in public before, so it's fine. I was groomed as a child by my kind of like stepfather. And I went to the sauna with him too. And now looking back, I'm extremely uncomfortable with it. And I think it's way too easy for pedophiles to abuse these cultural rules. And I know that this is something that was heavily encouraged by people on the left, especially the Green Party. Just a few decades ago, the Green Party officially wanted to legalize pedophilia, make it part of normal German law. And they have now allegedly condemned it. However, now they are just encouraging it quietly within their LGBT propaganda. So yes, you are completely correct. It is very hard to draw the line. And it should be so innocent and normal to be naked around your family. In Germany, this is something that was normalized. But I think in in public spaces like saunas, maybe we should start to discourage it, especially in the current LGBT climate, where this is a very easy way for pedophiles to invade these spaces and then make it something that is absolutely not innocent.
I want to ask you about this story we've been tracking the child sex trafficking operations out of the Ukraine. This has been happening for years, but it was thrown into high gear, obviously, after the special military operation from the Russian side and the invasion. Now, I mean, it's absolutely out of control. And we just learned a convicted British sex offender was arrested after attempting to stage a fake wedding with a 9-year-old Ukrainian girl. For those of our viewers that don't understand, like, Ukraine is a hotbed of sex trafficking. I mean, absolute disaster. The grooming that goes on there and basically the selling of these young girls to like rich Europeans. It was happening at Disneyland Paris. He was putting on a wedding at Disneyland Paris, this guy, with a 9-year-old Ukrainian, and the staff was shocked that he was arrested as a result of it. So, I mean, how bad is the sort of child sex trafficking operations throughout Ukraine?
We know that it's extreme in Ukraine. However, I would like to focus on this article in particular because when I read the first article about it, I immediately noticed that they said for legal reasons they cannot name the perpetrator. And so I looked it up again, and I found that in different media, they actually announced the name and gave us a face. And the face of a perpetrator is, well, not the baked beans and toast kind of British. It's a man who's clearly brown from some different cultural background, somebody that you might expect to engage in marrying children. And so this, I think, is the most problematic part, that we are importing this culture that takes advantage of the child trafficking climate that is already there. And we need to do everything in our power to discourage it and to prevent it. And if somebody's going to call me racist for that, well, the statistics are very clear. So,
well, the things you're bringing up here, and I want to thank you for that response about sharing your personal story, and bless your heart for that. My heart breaks for you. But what you're saying here is, even if we have to buck up against social norms around protecting immigrants, around our culture of nudity, we need to be able to have these conversations because the priority is to protect children. And that is not where our governments start. That's where they are last, right?
Yeah. Our government only cares about this agenda. That's why it's so obvious that it's a clear agenda. What exactly the agenda is for? Well, I think long-term, the goal is to develop this kind of like Soviet European Union that's like a super state and can control the national sovereign democracies, because that way they can still pretend that we have democracies in place in our individual nations. However, they will always be they have to surrender underneath the umbrella of the European Union. I think that's the goal, and they can achieve it by normalizing complete degeneracy and intimidating us into silence by censoring those who call it out.
Right. Yeah, that's why I named this segment Perverts in Europe, because it seems like they have the social advantage of the government. Obviously, it's quite useful if you were a government to have these perverts as your slaves. And someone who feels like you, that we need to protect our social fabric, is more of a threat. So that's why you've got such a strong voice.
And you have to ask yourself the question, people like Ursula von der Leyen and all these government authorities who are encouraging this, who are enforcing it, you have to ask yourself, why do they feel so comfortable doing this? You have to be a psychopath, or you have to actually be perverted yourself to think that this is okay in some way. Even if it's for your own gain, for your own power, you have to be absolutely perverted. So they have skeletons in the closet, I'm sure.
Right.
I think you're absolutely right about that. How many of these people, these perverts, are actually in the government and running the government? We saw that in the United States under the Biden administration, for sure. Naomi, thank you so much for your bravery. Thank you for your great journalism, and thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much again for having me on such an important topic.